In this video, we're going to talk about the different tools a president can use for governing. The president has a few different functions to fulfill. There are executive functions, there are legislative functions. The president does play a small role in lawmaking, and then there are other tools that the president can use to try and advance their agenda. First, let's look at the legislative function. When Congress wants to pass a law, a bill is introduced in one of the two chambers. It must then be passed by the House and the Senate, and then it shows up on the president's desk. This is where the president gets involved in the lawmaking process. They can sign the bill into law. So by it passing through the House, the Senate, and then the president's signature, that becomes law. Or the president can choose not to sign it into law. That's called vetoing the bill. They can decide not to sign it into law. Now, a president's veto can be overridden by Congress with a 2/3 majority in each chamber. That's a pretty significant hurdle. The president can also use something called a pocket veto. And a pocket veto can happen near the end of a congressional session. So as Congress is about to expire, it's about to end, and the president has a bill on their desk, and they could just choose not to sign it and wait until clock runs out. That's called a pocket veto. But really the president's two roles in lawmaking are signing the bill so it becomes a law, or vetoing the bill so it stops and doesn't move any further. Now, the president can use executive orders to try and get the government to do what they want it to do outside of the lawmaking process. The executive orders, what they do is they direct the executive agencies that are responsible to the president to enforce the laws in a certain way. So if Congress is responsible for writing the laws, the president oversees the executive branch in their implementation of the laws. Here's a few examples of what an executive order could do. It could grant approval to an oil pipeline, or it could rescind and revoke approval for oil pipeline construction. It could direct an agency like the Environmental Protection Agency to stop enforcing certain pollution regulations, or it could direct them to enforce certain ones instead of others. It might also direct the Department of Homeland Security or other border agencies to reprioritize their deportation efforts. For example, don't deport this class of immigrant, deport this class instead. So these are all examples of different ways that a president might use the power of the executive branch to enforce and apply the laws in a certain way. The president does have some other tools in their toolbox. One of them is the State of the Union address. Now, by definition, according to the separation of powers, the president isn't even allowed in Congress. However, periodically they will be invited to give a speech to a joint session of Congress. Joint session means all members of the House and Senate together. This is called the State of the Union address, when the president gives an update on how they think things are going and their plans for the upcoming year. The president can also use what's known as the bully pulpit. The thinking is that the president, as a national figure, has a national audience, and they can use that high profile to try and direct people to do things they want to do. For example, urging Congress to pass a law, urging Congress to write new legislation so they can sign it into law. President Trump was probably the exemplar of using the bully pulpit. He would often take to social media to chastise members of Congress for not voting a certain way, or even calling out members of the media for coverage that he saw unfair. He really exemplified using the communications aspect of the presidency to try and get what they wanted. So just to recap, when the president is governing, they do not have a direct role in making the laws. However, they do have some legislative functions. They can sign bills or they can veto them. Executive functions, including executive orders, and there are other tools as well, such as using the profile of the State of the Union and just the general bully pulpit to try and convince others to adopt your agenda.